Sally Field just shattered everything you thought you knew about Forrest Gump. For 30 years, she carried a secret so devastating that it would change how you see one of Hollywood's most beloved films forever. While millions celebrated her as the perfect mother figure, Field was quietly enduring something that would break most people. The job everybody believed was a career success. It was a career death penalty, and she understood that from the first day on the set. But here's what is most outrageous. It wasn't a matter of a single casting choice. What befell Sally Field reveals a sinister truth every woman in Hollywood has to deal with the moment they are no longer young enough. And when you find out what actually happened behind those warm scenes, you'll never see Mrs. Gump the same again. The truth Field finally discovered isn't only unjust, it's inhumane. And the most twisted thing, everyone in the profession just took it as absolutely normal. But wait until you hear about the confrontation that happened on set, the painful realization that hit her during filming, and the industry's secret that she's now exposing after 3 decades of silence. The year was 1994, and Forrest Gump was about to become the cultural phenomenon that would define a generation. Tom Hanks was delivering the performance of his lifetime. The special effects were revolutionary, and people were falling in love with a tale of kindness, determination, and the American dream. But for one of its stars, this huge success came at a cost that no one could have anticipated. What makes this tale all the more surprising is that Sally Field nearly quit the project altogether. There were times during initial script talks when she had seriously thought about turning down the role, not due to a lack of script quality, but because of what taking it would signify for her career going forward. She could already see the writing on the wall, and it frightened her. But Hollywood can do things with offers that make them hard to turn down. The movie had Oscar potential all over it. Robert Zemeckis was at the peak of his directorial strength, riding the wave of Back to the Future success, and Tom Hanks was already rumored to be a Best Actor contender. To be involved in a project with that level of legacy is basically irresistible for any actor when your intuition is screaming at you that something doesn't feel right. Sally Field stepped onto that set as Hollywood royalty. 2-time Academy Award winner. The actress who had dominated the tube with Gidget and The Flying Nun then established her dramatic prowess in Norma and Places in the Heart. She was esteemed, successful, and at the height of her game. So, when the script for Forrest Gump arrived on her desk, she ought to have been thrilled at the prospect of being a part of what would be one of the greatest films ever made. Instead, she felt something that would haunt her for the next 30 years. The script was quirky, unlike anything she'd worked on before. The premise seemed risky, and nobody really knew if audiences would connect with this unusual story about a man with an intellectual disability who somehow finds himself at the center of major historical events. Field has conceded that the project was always uncertain, like unwrapping a box of chocolates without knowing what you might receive. But this is where the tale goes dark. Field wasn't only unsure about the box office appeal of the film. She was struggling with something much more intimate, something that struck at the heart of her identity as an actress and as a woman. The position she was being considered for would make her face a harsh reality regarding Hollywood that she wasn't prepared to meet. And that reality would shift everything regarding the way she viewed her career, her value, and her role in an industry she'd dedicated her life to. The casting choice that came so naturally to others felt like a stab in the back to Field. She was being asked to play the mother of Tom Hanks, a man who was, in fact, 10 years younger than she was. Consider that for a moment. In what universe does it make sense for someone to play the parent of a human being who could conceivably be her younger brother? But this wasn't merely about age. This was about what that casting decision symbolized. It was Hollywood's subtle way of letting Field know, not in so many words, that her days as a leading lady were behind her. At age 47, she was being quietly steered toward the mother category, while male actors of her age were still getting leading man parts opposite women half their age. The worst part, she had to have the work. She wanted to be in something special. So she smiled, said yes, and set about preparing for a role that would become one of the loves of her career and one of the sorrows of her career. What Sally Field went through on Forrest Gump was not an isolated instance. It was one of a systematic pattern in Hollywood to dismantle women's careers the moment they are no longer seen by industry standards to be sexually desirable. And the cruel fact is that moment arrives a lot quicker than you anticipate. Field has talked openly about the moment when she realized that her romantic leading lady days were over. It wasn't something that happened gradually or gently. It was like crashing into a wall at top speed. One day, she was being offered sophisticated, multifaceted roles as love interests and heroines. The following day, she was being offered mother roles nearly exclusively. The Hollywood mathematics of ageism are harsh and unyielding. Women turn 40 and all of a sudden are fighting over a dwindling supply of mommy characters, wise mentors, and supporting roles, while their male counterparts keep getting love stories, action pictures, and leading man roles well into their 60s and 70s. Field was stuck in this machine, observing as younger women actresses took over the parts she would once have been offered. As she was supposed to be thankful for whatever mother figure fell in her lap, the business had determined that her value proposition had changed, and she could do nothing about it. Here's what made the Forrest Gump scenario even more agonizing. This was not any mother part. This was Mrs. Gump, a woman who would speak some of the most memorable lines in the history of cinema, who would be the emotional center of a movie that would reach millions of hearts. It was a part that should have been like a blessing. It was like a consolation prize. The auditioning itself made clear just how mainstream this age bias had become in Hollywood. When casting directors and executives were talking about casting Field with Hanks, no one raised an eyebrow. No one inquired as to whether it made sense for a younger person to portray the mother of someone older. It was done with the same offhand unconcern that is provided by a system so dysfunctional that its own absurdities appear conventional. Field has confessed that she was not the only actress cast for the role who was confronted by this same harsh arithmetic. Other skilled women in their 40s and 50s were also being tested on how believably maternal they could be, not on their acting ability or star appeal. The whole casting exercise was based on the premise that older women were there to enable men's narratives and not to have their own. Field has spoken about the emotional contradiction of portraying Mrs. Gump while wrestling with the internal crisis of having lost her romance heroine role. She was to portray maternal sagacity and unconditional acceptance, but secretly grieve over the loss of her romantic heroine character. She had to convey warmth and happiness while facing the bitter truth that Hollywood had aged her out of a whole genre of roles. The irony was suffocating. She was bringing one of the cinema's most caring mother figures to life, while professionally diminished and invisibly made to feel personally insignificant. Each scene that she worked on reminded her that the industry valued her only as a way for other people's narratives, not as the star of her own. And the sickest part, she was supposed to be thankful for it. She was supposed to grin during interviews, thank the writers, and pretend that this casting choice was utterly reasonable. Because in the twisted paradigm of Hollywood, it was reasonable. Women give birth. Men are legends. But Field's own journey was just getting started. The worst of it was yet to come. The production of Forrest Gump was demanding in ways that went far beyond the normal stresses of making a movie. Long production schedules, intricate scenes, and the tension of working on what everyone prayed would be an important film produced in an environment of concentrated intensity and high stakes. But for Sally Field, there was one more level of emotional richness that nobody else on the set could ever grasp. Director Robert Zemeckis was notorious for his perfectionistic approach to directing, and his idea of Forrest Gump was precise and adamant. Field was in constant debate with Zemeckis regarding her interpretation of the character, and the conversations weren't always easy. She has spoken about how there were times when the director's idea and her interpretation of Mrs. Gump were not compatible, and tension arose that sometimes made the set awkward. But Zemeckis challenged her performance in ways she hadn't anticipated, even when it was challenging. This artistic